Sign up for Melanin Muse's free weekly love letter at melaninmuse.com. Delivered right to your inbox every Wednesday. Get full video podcast episodes of the Pivot Muse and indulge in Black women's brilliance while we learn and share our pivotal stories. It's fall, 1991 to be exact. A new sound in hip-hop emerges with Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Yo-Yo drops. You can't play with my yo-yo. Don't try to play me out. Don't try to play me out. Featuring Ice Cube. The West Coast is on deck with some heavy hitters from Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac, while the East Coast is still standing tall with Wu-Tang Clan, Biggie, Nas, Foxy Brown, Lil' Kim, Big Pun, and Gang Starr. Tina, Trina, and Ebony strategically land at the same high school by taking an entry exam to attend Edison Technical Vocational High School. Edison sits at the edge of the city, near the suburbs, and requires students to take a city bus to school each day. Students are required to explore vocational options during ninth grade, rotating in various shop classes such as electrical, business, photography, automotive, and cosmetology. Thereafter, students get to choose the shop pathway for 10th through 12th grade. Tina's ready to mingle with some of the high school boys after meeting one of the seniors in the neighborhood. The girls are in full character as a rap trio group. They buy some bright orange construction jackets with brown corduroy collars. Everyone quickly recognizes they are part of the Royal Tree female rap group, as they made waves in the city after their performance at Manhattan Square Park this summer. Jokingly, Trina and Tina decide to act as if they're seniors when other students inquire. This joke goes on for at least a month before the older students realize they're all freshmen. They dress alike daily, a tradition that started in middle school. But during those days, Trina would sneak African-inspired outfits from her big sister for Tina to wear. But in the current hip-hop fashion trends, they are all rocking tracksuits, oversized shirts, and the latest Jordan kicks. Tina and Trina are walking into the cafeteria to find Ebony. They spot her over there at the table with some of their male friends playing Tuck. Tuck is a fast-paced, rummy-type card game for 2 to 4 players, which is a classic game played in Black families. The goal is to be the first player to run out of cards by playing spreads and having the fewest points at the end of the round. As they approach the table, they see a group are playing for money, something Ebony loves to do for fun. "Girl, you stay taking somebody's money," Trina says to Ebony. They laugh. "Yeah, I know. I had to get in on this one," Ebony responds. "Okay, but can you please meet us at the bus stop after school so we can practice at Trina's house today?" Tina says to Ebony as she daps her up. The bell rings, so Tina and Trina head to class while Ebony stays behind to spend another lunch period playing Tuck. Tina's pivot story continues in episode 9 of the Pivot Muse Podcast and is brought to you by Penthouse Media.
Before we get started, it's important for me to acknowledge that the Pivot Muse podcast is brought to us by Melanin Muse, and Melanin Muse is our love letter to Black women. We're sharing Black women's genius and impact on the world and owning our narrative. It's our time. As you have pivoted throughout your life and career, who are your Melanin Muses and what impact have they made on your journey?
I have 2 childhood friends. I admired them for having their life already planned out. One knew she wanted to be a judge. The other one knew she wanted to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't until later for me. I think it was probably my junior year. I said, I'll just go into education because I enjoyed teaching and helping others in whatever capacity. I really admire them for just knowing their path. Nobody's journey is easy, but they got there. And I was a late bloomer, but I got there too.
I love it. Listen, some of the most successful people in the world we know were late bloomers. I learned that. I learned that maybe in my 30s when you're getting that 30s and you're starting to feel pressed about like what you've accomplished and how much
Right.
money you have in the bank. I started reading these books. I was like, oh, Really? So the millionaires, it didn't happen till their 40s?
Yes.
It was very helpful to realize that. I know our younger folks struggle with that. But if they do the research, they'll realize that it's life experience that gets you there.
Life
So,
experience and platforms like this.
right.
They listen to your platform. So many words of wisdom and encouragement. I wish I had that.
Absolutely. Before we get started, it was one question that I didn't ask you. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like I'm in a place where I didn't think I would ever be, if that
That's
makes sense,
beautiful.
in my life. Not only good, but also grateful. Yes,
So
that's
that's
good.
awesome. All right, let's get started. The Pivot Muse brings to you curated stories and advice from global professionals on one of life's most important decisions, which is the pivot. I'm your host, Natina Marie, and our guest today is Blanca Boucree, CEO and founder of Diamarx Management. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
So
you
excited
for
about this
having
conversation.
me.
Perfect. Diamarx being a retailer,
Yeah,
and a retailer in airports. I just thought
yeah.
this was such an important conversation for our audience to meet a Black woman, a woman that is in this space. How does one even get started getting into this type of business? And I have so many questions, but I'm going to start there.
There's different ways to get started. I worked for the New Orleans airport. I think it's still called Louis Armstrong International Airport. I was going to school, getting a master's in education. That all ties into my whole journey. In 96, as a regional manager for a company called New Management, they were also a minority owned company. So that's
Okay.
how I basically learned the business, was just through my regional director position. Retail was always something innate. No one taught me. It just came to me naturally. But I did learn a lot of the business side as the regional director. And that's how I came to really enjoy that part of the retail, because I'm not in the store anymore. I'm actually behind the scenes making things happen. So I really enjoyed that. I started in New Orleans, and then Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. I moved to Florida where my mother was, planning to go back to New Orleans and just never went back. So in the interim, the company that I had worked for in New Orleans, I was teaching in Orlando. And in the summers, the company would say, "Hey, can you run our business just for the summers?" I said, "Yeah," because that was easy to me. Teaching was a lot harder than running these stores. Then at the end of the summer, one of the co owners made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. It was definitely more money than teaching. At the time, I needed money because I lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. I needed to rebuild. So I took the position. And so in 2007 is when I started working in Orlando Airport. And then in 2015, so 8 years later, I decided to do some research on how do I get my own thing going here. Like I said, it was just natural to me. It's just listening to the customer's needs, rearranging things where it flowed in the stores. You can find things easy because you're shopping in an airport, so you're in a rush. So you don't have time to be looking from one end to the other. It just needed to flow. By the end of my term, I worked with them from 2007 to 2017. We had more stores. We had 8 stores. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, let me just humor myself and see what it takes to own one of these things and how to get into this business as an entrepreneur versus a manager. The first step was getting certified in your home state in the airport, and it's free. I said, okay, let me go for it. Let me get certified. Process was fairly easy. 2 years later, 2017, I was already discouraged. It's not going to happen. I don't even have money anyway to get this thing off the ground. A female entrepreneur, she owned 30 stores in 10 different airports. She became what we call in the industry a prime concessionaire. So
Okay.
once you become a prime concessionaire, you need to have a minority business partner. She called, I interviewed, and she made me her partner, and it was great just to get my foot in the door. That's how I got into the business. That first deal, People think when you start, it's like money just starts raining in your account. No, it
Right.
was really rough. I was making more money as a manager than I was as a business owner.
No,
So
that's
it was,
real.
yes, that was really bad. I've heard people who had businesses and passed it to their children. That's another way to get into the airport. If you have something already, if you're already an entrepreneur on the street somewhere, you can also bring your idea into the airport and the
Mhm.
airport can approve it or suggest something else, or you can just bring your expertise to the airport. So that those are different ways you can get in.
Right. As you were talking, I was thinking about other questions, but we're going to take it back because I
Okay.
mean, that's a really, really traumatic and difficult pivot that you had to make. It wasn't by
Yes.
choice when dealing with Katrina. So, can we take it back there and just talk about what did that look like for you? And how did you really survive? Because you had to move back home. It was a forced pivot on you.
Right. It was something unexpected. You don't plan for it. And how do you repair from that? So when it hit, I was working, teaching and working at the airport at the same time. And I said, oh, I am not going to evacuate. I'm tired and I'm just going to go home. I remember watching the news, and then back when we were little kids, TV would go off, right? There,
Right.
the snow, and you don't see that anymore. Well, that night, the reporter said, "If you haven't evacuated, God be with you." And then the TV just went off. I lived in New Orleans, grew up in New Orleans. We were used to hurricanes. I didn't really take it as serious as I should have. It was taking 9 hours just to evacuate to Baton Rouge, which only takes an hour to get there. I was exhausted. I said, I'll just sit it out. Well, the next day, after the hurricane came, but the next day is when the levees broke, and that's when all the water rushed the city. And I was on the roof for 4 days and got rescued off the roof by a helicopter basket. That was really low. I felt really low. First of all, I was disappointed I didn't evacuate. I'll never do that again. Second, I'm like, how did I get here? Everything's gone, just gone. Car, job, clothes, house, everything was just gone. My mom lived in Deltona, it's an area in Florida. The helicopter came, got me, left us on the highway to catch the bus to go to the Astrodome. I got to the Astrodome and I didn't even go in. It's almost like I wasn't in my head. It was like floating. And I walked to a rent-a-car place and I drove to Florida without sleep or anything. And Natina, I tell you, I get lost driving to Walgreens that I pass up every day. I don't know how I made it to Florida, but I made
Wow.
it. And that was before GPS or anything. My mom took me to Salvation Army because I had no clothes. Florida was letting teachers teach in their state without having to take their state exam. I had an interview, and so I needed clothes. She took me to the Salvation Army. We bought some clothes, and I got hired as a teacher in Florida. When I tell these stories, I always leave out all the grit. It was terrible. I was depressed. I felt so low. I felt no one cared. Like the whole city flooded, and I get to Florida, and Florida's great. Nobody's worried about New Orleans and the people, and people were dying in New Orleans. And
Right.
I just had it was really bad. So I started teaching, and then working at the airport in the summer, and for the same company that I worked for in New Orleans. But it was terrible. But it was a pivot because if not for Hurricane Katrina, I'd probably still be in New Orleans, probably
Mhm.
still doing the same thing. It pushed me out of my nest. I felt very low and very uncomfortable. Like I don't like Florida and I miss New Orleans. But every day I got better and better. It took me 3 years to finally like it. And that's when I met Erica. And that's what made everything just and so my son, he's 26 now, but at the time he was maybe 9 or 10. He lived with his father, and Erica and I bonded because her two boys lived with their father, and I was like, I'm not the only one. It was a big pivot in my life. It took about 3 years for me to get to the other side and realize that it's a big boulder on your shoulders,
Right.
but once you get to the other side, you're like, okay, I will. never live in New Orleans again. I love New Orleans and I'll go visit every time, but I won't ever
Right.
live there again.
I mean,
And
that trauma is I can't even imagine. Wow. And I'm really just hearing your story. I've been knowing you for some years now,
I
but just
know.
hearing that part of your story is at first it was sending chills down me. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
because those images pop up in my head, right? I wasn't there. I'm just watching it on TV.
yeah, yeah,
And then trying to do what we can here in Atlanta, make donations and things like that. But
yeah.
to know that you were on your roof for 4 days
Yes.
is
Yep.
that's a lot. While you were on the roof, did you ever feel like you weren't gonna make it? Like, is somebody gonna
I
rescue me? Or you kept a
I was
positive mindset?
I kept a positive mindset, but I was also in disbelief. I'm like, we're in America. Like, what's taking them so long? We had no TV. We didn't know what was happening. Day four. What's taking them so long? We're in America, the greatest military in the world, and all this, but here we are. Everybody's just stuck. The people across the street from me were screaming, help. We had a Marine in our
Mhm.
complex, and he wrote with flour on the roof some kind of code that military people would understand. And that's how the helicopter came to our building. They came to our building first.
Wow.
So yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. And
Mhm.
Natina, I usually when I tell this story, I am in tears. But
Mm.
I've gotten stronger. But I usually
Okay.
I'm in tears when I tell this story
Right.
because it was terrible.
Of
I
course.
felt like I did lose everything material, but I also my son stayed and lived with his father, so I felt like I lost everything, my
Mhm.
job, everything. So I was very depressed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't want to breeze over something such an important time in your life that was obviously super traumatic. And if people meet you today, they wouldn't know that you
Yeah.
went through what you went through. Thank God we don't look like what we go through, right?
Right. Thank goodness.
Seriously, but thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to know. I love the fact that you, in such a trying time, that you leaned on what you knew and you took the opportunity to go back and teach. But
Right.
I want to talk about your business and where you are, but you mentioned something that I want to bring up, and that is that your son was with his father.
Yes.
And I would love for you to share because, again, I know when you met Erica, you met someone that made you realize that I'm not alone in this space where I'm a mom and I'm not taking care of my son full time.
Right.
Can you talk
Mhm.
about that transition for you where your son was now with his father?
So, because of Hurricane Katrina, I moved to Florida. But because my ex husband and I had joint custody, I couldn't bring my son to Florida with me without his permission. He granted permission just for 1 year until the city got back opened and all that. So my son had to be returned back to New Orleans. It was my decision to either go back with him and stay in New Orleans or to stay in Florida. I took my son back after the year. My ex husband comes from a very good family and they're good people. I wasn't worried about that. I really now this might make me cry.
Oh, take your time. No,
I
take your
missed parts of his childhood moments that I can never get. I
time.
miss football games. I miss a headache. I miss a tummy ache. I missed all that stuff.
Right.
And he's my only child, so that's my only motherly experience. And I didn't get to use all my motherly instincts, but he was in good hands. It was a tough decision.
That's
My family was
go ahead.
here, and
Mhm.
after a divorce, his family was taking his side. I would have been all alone there. I don't know. I just decided to come back to Florida
Well,
without him.
see, that's the thing. Thank you for sharing that. Eric and I didn't get to talk about it, but we will. I lived and experienced that with her in the
Hmm.
whole transition for her. I'm proud of you because sometimes in life we are faced with these really, really tough decisions. And sometimes we have to choose the road that we know that we will be sane and that we can flourish in so that we can then give back to our family. That was the right decision. He's with his father. and we are both parents. And as much as it hurt,
Yeah.
I know for sure if you felt that he wasn't going to be in a good situation, you would have went back. But
Right.
now you were able to heal,
Mhm.
and he was able to have two parents that were doing well. I want to say that because of course I didn't go through that, but when I did move away from Nadia's father, and I had to learn how to navigate that and what does that look
Mhm.
like, and make sure that she had a relationship with her dad. I think other women need to know that it's okay to choose the path that's going to be the healthy path, because if you're not a healthy mom, then
Right.
you might have had those moments, but would your son got the best of you back
Right. No,
dealing with
not
that
back.
trauma, dealing with what you went through to get out, and
Right.
knowing that you need to heal and you need to be able to provide for him and be a good mom to him.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
definitely
thank you.
something. You're
Thank you for
welcome.
saying that. I don't think no one's ever told me that they're proud of
Oh,
me.
I
So
am. I am
thank
proud of you. It was the first time I ever dealt with that years ago with my best friend. And of course, I'm right there by her side fighting for her to get her kids, get your kids back, get your kids back. So she had to have that reality moment and conversation with me and say, he's a good dad. They're boys. You
Right.
know, they're in good hands. It's the sacrifice of
Yes.
me missing those moments
Yeah.
was the right thing to do for him at that moment. And
Yes.
that's why I'm
Absolutely.
proud of you, because
Yeah.
it's a selfish thing when women hold on to their child no matter what and feel like the father can't do their job,
Right.
especially for a young man.
Right.
That's the part now, hindsight and seeing what you did with your life in Florida and where you are now, you really have to give yourself grace. You do,
Yes. Thank you. Thank
for making that decision, because it's actually a more mature decision that a
you.
lot
Yeah.
of people are unable to do.
Right. Or understand. Some people just don't get it. They're like, how?
Right. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing
Yeah.
that. Like
Thank
that's
you.
I know that's the biggest pivot of your life, what you had to
Mhm.
deal with because of Katrina.
Yes.
Outside of the traumatic pivot, what would be a pivot that was been really impactful in your journey in business, career, life?
Well, let me go to career. Once the owner of the company offered me the position at the airport to leave being an educator and come to work at the airport full time, after so many years, I got stuck. I felt stuck. And I didn't like the fact that I couldn't, and to this day, I cannot stand someone telling me my schedule. You know what I'm saying? So you're working Christmas and you're going to work Thanksgiving and Mother's Day because everybody called out and I got to do it. It got to me. Like at first it was fine. Okay, I worked. But after a while, it was like, come on now. I can't live my life according to your needs. So I thought and thought every day, what can I do to get out of this? Because I felt stuck. I didn't want to get out of bed to go to work. It was another time in my life where I was like, this is not good. Driving in a car to work one day, and I had Joel Osteen on the radio, and he said, I'll never forget these words. He said, if you look back on your life 7 years back and you're still doing the same thing today, something has to change because God wants you to live in abundance.
Mm.
And you can't live in abundance if you're doing the same thing day after day, year after year. And that resonated with me. With those words, I was like, oh, I got to do something because I've been doing this for the same thing. And it's not just career wise. I was living in the same house, driving the same car, paying the same bills. Everything was the same. I don't like the space I'm in. That's when I started doing the research and said, okay, let me see, because this is what I'm good at. I know I'm good at retail. Let me see what I can do with this skill. And that's when I got certified in my state. And 2 years later, the lady reached back and brought someone up with her.
Thank you. Let's dig a little bit into the process with the airport becoming certified. Is free. Now I know you may have not felt like it was a lot because right, you have certain personalities and you're used to like pushing through some paperwork and it doesn't
Right.
scare you. Tell a little bit about that process. You also have a government certification,
Yes.
and that can be a little complicated. Is it a lot of paperwork. What advice do you give someone that's just like, I've been in retail for all these years. I would love to now be an owner and be in an airport.
The application is easy. It's easier if you don't have a business because you don't have to show your business taxes and all that other stuff. If you're just fresh and don't have a business and you just want to try this, it's a simple application. They do ask for taxes, they ask for resume, they ask for experience, and they ask for just your background. They do a background check because you're in the airport, so they want to make sure you're not a terrorist or anything like that. But that process is easy either way. It's just easier if you don't have a business. Now, if you have a business, you have a lot more paperwork to fill out. You got to do a network statement. You have to show them your last 3 years of business taxes and other things. Every state has their own application process. In Atlanta, they have their own application process, but it's the same thing for you to get a business in the airport. It takes about 90 days for them to review it, and then they'll set up an interview with you. They call it a site visit. They come to your place of business. Mine at the time was my home. I had a little space, a little room, not even a room. It was like a little space where I had a desk and a file cabinet and a computer, and that was my office. And that was acceptable still. You don't need to have an office building or anything like that. They ask you some questions and then they go back and they approve you or not approve you. I think the times when you will not get approved are if you're a veterinarian and you say, "Oh, I want to open a Gucci store." They're like, "Well, those two careers don't really line up." But if in retail, if you have an idea, this doesn't even have to be retail. If you have a great idea and you just present it to the airport, they'll say, "Okay, that sounds great." Like vending machines. We never had vending machines before. Now we have a vending machine program. So it just takes the airport to listen to your idea and to accept your idea into their. And there's also different certifications you can have. My certification is called ACDBE, which stands for Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. But there's also minority women. It's called a WMBE, I believe. There's a bunch of them. If you only do hospitality or maintenance, there's a certification for that too. So there's a bunch of them. So you go to the website of your state airport, small business section, whatever you think you qualify for, you apply for that certification.
Okay. And so the process that you just mentioned was for that certification.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. That just educated me. I always wondered, like, how does businesses get into the airport? It wasn't something that I took any time to research, but it's definitely interesting to learn about it and then
Yeah.
to know someone that's thriving
Yeah.
in this space. I'm like, oh, this is really intriguing. I also want to share this as a resource to others. Tell us about your business and what you have going on in the airport, and is it more than one airport?
Before I answer that, I want to also say that because you mentioned, I always wanted to know about this. It's getting the word's getting out now, but at one time it was like a secret society in these airports, and it was male driven. So we wouldn't know. I feel like the reason why I know is because I worked in the airport for so many years and I had my foot in the door. I just
Right.
had to push it open. But if you're walking down the street, you wouldn't know how to. It's just getting the word out there, but it's not impossible. I have 7 operations in the airport. 3 of them are food and beverage, and then the other 4 are all retail. I have specialty retail and I have a news and gift store. And it's only in one airport. A lot of the people have several different airports. Once you're certified in your home state, you still have to get certified in other states. Everything is bid driven. So it's a bid and it's a term. Once the term is up in, let's say, Atlanta, I'll know and I'm like, get certified in Atlanta and I want to bid on this space here. And that's how that works. I have a Wendy's, a Nature Stable, and a Freshens. And then I have a news and gift store. And then I have a Swarovski store, which is crystals and jewelry. It's called Soul Shades, which is sunglasses. And a Ron, which is indigenous to Florida, a Ron surf apparel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So when you first started, you started with one store?
My first deal was 3 stores, and it was the specialty retail. Specialty retails, it's such a captured audience. They do well, but they don't do well. Compared to a newsstand and food, forget it. And that was my first deal. When I tell you I was making more money as a manager than I was as an entrepreneur, those are the stores. But I loved it. I wasn't there for the money. I really wanted my freedom, my life. I wanted to control my life and all that. I enjoyed it, but I was broke. Swarovski, Soul Shades, and Ron John. That
Okay.
was my first 3 stores. And then I got blessed with Wendy's, Nature's Table, and Freshens.
Okay.
And
And
then came the next
you
thing.
bidded on those.
Yes.
They didn't come from the woman that
No.
offered the partnership. Okay.
I want to mention this too. The lady that reached back and brought me as her partner sold her company to another company. So she's retired. But that's how it works. You can just build up to, and then somebody's going to want to hopefully buy your company if you want to sell. I also forgot to mention that I'm a minority company. The primes are companies like HMS Host, Paradise Lagardère, Delaware North, and so on and so on. Those companies have the millions of billions of dollars for the infrastructure for these stores and the licensing fees and the royalties that go into these franchises. That so I just partner with that big company and I get a percentage of what we agree upon. I'm here and I go to the operations every day and make sure my presence is felt and that type of thing, but I don't have to manage them anymore. First deal, which was Swarovski, Ron John, and Soul Shades, I worked for 5 years before I finally was able to hire somebody to replace me because it
That's
just
a
didn't make
really
any
good
money.
point.
Yeah.
Yes. You got to put that grind in.
Yes, you do. Yeah, it's not all like I'm in the airport, yay, it's raining money. No.
But it's worth
It,
it in the end, right? Like it's worth
it's
putting that time in to
it's
get
worth
there.
putting the time in. Yep, and it's also not only the time but the belief. Because I'm telling you, I at one time I was like, there was a time where I doubted like I made the right decision. Constantly believing, nope, I'm not giving up. This is where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to make this happen. You stay consistent with your belief, and it'll work out. It will finally just level out.
Right. Being consistent with anything, your business or whatever your goals are, that consistency will pay off every time.
Yeah.
What does your day look like? Give us a typical day running, was that 7 operations?
It's not so hectic because you can own these spots in different airports. It's not like you have to be there every day. I'm just local, so I go every day and I show my face. A lot of times the employees they come to me wanting to solve these problems and I do try, but so the managers, can you stay away because when you come they all want to go to you, step over my head and go to you. But I actually like that because I want to hear what their issues are. I actually want to know how I can help, how can we make things better. The manager
Right.
won't tell me, she's going to say everything's wonderful. I go there, I meet with the general manager, I meet with the regional director. We talk about projected sales, why are sales high, why are sales low, what can we do better, and daily operations. Like right now, we're going through a bidding process and we're saying, well, Swarovski is really on a drop down trend. Maybe we should bring in a new concept. And so now we're researching new concepts about the same price points. A
Right.
lot of behind the scenes stuff that I enjoy. I really enjoy
Right.
that part.
You're in this space. How many years has it been that you've been an owner?
8 years.
8 years. We're at 8 years and you're loving it. Are there any other spaces that you can see yourself pivoting into if you're thinking about the next 5 years?
I really want to follow the footsteps of Susan Stackhouse, who reached back and brought me on. I want to grow my business. I want a little office building with employees and want to grow to the point where someone wants to buy it and sell it. That's what I really want to do.
Right.
I do see myself going into other airports. I'm only in Orlando Airport right now. I'm certified in 5 other airports currently, just waiting for opportunities to come along. I did learn when I first got certified, it doesn't come right away. I waited 2 years to get an interview before I even got a deal. In the meantime, I just keep certifying myself in different states. And if there's an opportunity there, I'm like, oh, I'm there. I'm already ready. Let's go. That's where I see my future. I really want to grow it to where it's a self-sufficient, self-standing company. And some of these big giant companies will say, hey, we want to buy your 30 stores.
It's gonna
Yes.
happen. You bring up a really good point because some businesses or even just careers, say being an influencer, it could happen like overnight, right?
Yeah.
You go viral, all of a sudden you're an influencer. And with this business, I hear you have to have a lot of patience with the process. It's easy to get through the certification, but then you're waiting on your opportunity and you have to bid on opportunities. So now you have to bid and win. That's important. I'm glad you brought it up and even reiterated that because people need to know you will have to have either your 9 to 5 or whatever else you're doing to make a living and be really like have that wherewithal to make it through the process to
Right.
actually do this.
Right.
Any advice you have?
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I'm leaving important pieces out. When you get your first deal, you don't just walk onto the deal. You got to bring some money with you. So my first deal, I had to get a loan. And Susan Stackhouse, she's the one who her company loaned me the money for my first deal. Really, you don't make money because you're paying back the loan. It's really hard. However, setbacks and somewhat failures aren't really bad things. Like these things you learn from and they make you better. So my next deal, I got a loan for that one too. It takes money, especially food and beverage. I didn't even
Right.
have $10,000 when I first started. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? I actually borrowed from the bank, borrowed from the lady, and put it together to get in the door with her. So it takes money. When you're making money, finally, when you pay off your loans and you're making money, you don't want to go spend it. You want to put it to the side. So when your next opportunity comes, you don't have to borrow as much. You're going to have
Right.
to borrow because it's millions. It's still millions, but you may not have to borrow that much. That's important. I wanted to mention that too. You don't just walk on and they're just giving you money. They want to know you got, what do they call that in the game?
They want you to have skin in the game.
Yes. Yeah, they don't just give it to you. You got to have some money and you got to have patience because you're paying your loan off and your distribution sometimes may not cover your loan payment. You are going to have to pay the difference of that. That's what I was struggling with my first loan.
Okay.
It wasn't making enough money to pay the loan back. So I out of pocket had to pay the difference.
Another thing that comes to mind is credit. If you need a loan, that means you need to be credit worthy. Were you credit worthy? What was your credit
Yeah.
like? So they took a
No.
chance on you.
Yeah, they took a real big chance on me. What she liked about me was my experience and my results.
Growth
She
was
believed in
amazing.
that. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
amazing. Another thing is banks, they don't understand this business, and then you don't have collateral to get a loan from them. So they denied me everywhere I went. Not only because of credit, but because you don't have any collateral. Her company loaned the bulk of it to me. And I had to come up with my own money. That's where I was borrowing from anywhere I could to make it happen. You do need good credit. Now I'm in the process of building a good relationship with my bank. Now I can have a line of credit. And when those times come, they see the money coming in and they're like, okay, we trust her now.
Okay, I love
So,
it. This has been a great talk. I want to make sure we play our pivot or push game before you have to go. We got to have you back and do a check in. Okay.
yes, keep me on my toes.
Right. I know you got to have something new for us.
Yeah.
So we're gonna play pivot or push,
All
and I'm just
right.
gonna throw a couple scenarios at you, and you let me know if you're gonna pivot or push. You're 25 years old, and you're in a tough situation with your current employer, very unhappy, no liquid savings, but you do have a 401k. And if you cash out, you can take home after taxes $20,000 and start over. Do you pivot, take the money, or do you push?
I push. Push.
Might come back to that one. Thank you. Okay. Let's say you're in a serious relationship. You discover significant differences in values and life goals. While you're tempted to pivot away and seek a more compatible partner, you deliberate on whether open communication and compromise can bridge the gap, or if it's time to move on and focus on your personal happiness. Do you pivot or push?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would try to push and
Hmm.
make it work. Not make it work, but see if it can work.
Okay.
And if not, of course, pivot.
Right. Okay. I like it. So, your child is expressing a strong interest in unconventional extracurricular activities. You face the choice of pivoting towards supporting their passion or adhering to the traditional paths of education, balancing the potential benefits of nurturing the unique talents against societal expectations. Do you pivot or you push?
Pivot. Pivot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Why?
I think because from generation to generation, things change. It's not the same for everybody. School's not for everyone, just like someone telling me my schedule. That wasn't for me. I'm open to hear. And
Right.
sometimes traditions aren't good either. Because if I was a lawyer and I wanted my daughter to be a lawyer and then my granddaughter to be a lawyer as well, it's a tradition in our family that everybody, all the females are, that's not good. You're pushing someone to do something that maybe they don't want to
Well, thank you for
do.
playing Pivot or Push, and thank you for being with us. This has been an amazing conversation. I
Thank
know folks are
you.
going to get a lot out of it.
I hope so. I want to leave somebody, whoever's listening, with this that playing it safe sometimes gives you unsafe results. And I don't mean go put all your money in the stock market. If you have something that's in here eating away at you and you feel it, you know it's gotta, something has to change. Listen to that. Don't be afraid of it and go for it. It's not impossible. I thought it was impossible. I didn't have money at all to get into this business. I borrowed it, but it all worked out. Don't let fear scare you away from whatever is eating inside of it. Could be you want to open a hair salon. It could be you want to be a principal versus a teacher. It could be whatever it is that's eating at you. Follow that feeling because
Mhm.
it's in there for a reason. Success is not always money. I'm happy the fact that I don't have to work Christmas anymore, you know,
Okay.
or I can spend time with my family, that kind of thing. So that's success in my eyes as well. Sometimes failures or Hurricane Katrina is not a setback.
That was definitely a real gem to share because I've said it now probably almost on every show, but fear restricts movement.
Ooh, that's right. And it's so true.
Mhm.
Natina, I love your show.
Thank
This is a
you.
great theme. I can't wait to hear everybody else.
All right. Thank you.